Hi class, this is the material that I had thought we might be able to do together, but let me just do it this way. I wanted to just talk a little bit about gender and ethnicity, race, and preaching. Some of you may have taken whole classes on race, class, and gender. Some of you may have not. So this is just a thumbnail sketch to help you think about gender and ethnicity and race in preaching. You already have some experience in thinking about these things. I wanted you to open up the drawer of your experience by listening to a person of a different gender and of someone who is from a different ethnic or racial history than yours before we talked about this a little bit. So open up the drawer of your experience and let me just go over a few things. First, you can come back and do this exercise later. We would have done this together had we been face-to-face in class. I would ask you to take a look at these questions and ask yourself, what are women like and how does this influence their preaching if you're male? And if you're female, ask the converse question, what are men like and how does this influence their preaching? If you just take a piece of paper and write what are women like or what are men like, particularly when they're in the preaching roles, you would begin to take your assumptions and get them out in front of you. What are women like? Maybe they're more emotional, you think, or maybe they're more rooted in issues that pertain primarily to women rather than men. And maybe men, you assume, talk about human things rather than just male things. There's all sorts of assumptions we have, and this is neither right nor wrong. This is to just bring forward some of the assumptions that you may have and that you may have seen in your evaluations or you may have missed entirely. So this next screen is just to make sure that when we talk about some of these issues of gender, that you have some categories to think about. This is probably super basic, and many of you could take this much, much farther, but just make sure you have this in mind, that when we talk about these terms, that they have some distinctions. Usually when we talk about sex, we're talking about biology, about reproductive organs and structures, some assumptions about sort of biological roles and realities. When we're talking about gender, we're talking about something that is seen through behavior, cultural conditioning, assumed psychological traits, i.e., men are rational, women are emotional. I don't agree with that, but those are the kinds of things that are often sorted according to various societies and different historical periods according to gender. And then some of you are familiar and easy with using the word feminism. Some of you probably don't like the word or don't use it at all. But to know what it means is important. It's a theory of understanding the political, economic, social, and spiritual equality of the sexes. And it asks the question, are women human? Are men human? And in that common humanity, what are our politics, our economics, our social and spiritual realities? How do they function? And is there in those systems a place for everyone at the table? And so are they ordered in such a way that all may experience human flourishing? All right, so what does gender have to do with preaching? You may not have noticed, and it may not have come up, but if you go to a church over a period of time, you will find that your particular congregation probably holds to a particular view around gender. The Essentialist, you see it here before you, and I'm not going to go over it, but it basically is rooted in an understanding that biology is destiny. Whatever bodily organs you are born with, that tells you everything you need to know about the parameters of life and the roles that you will play. Social constructionist is embodied in that, or summarized in that word, in that phrase that's in blue. Children are what they learn. Basically, we're blank slates, and if we teach our children that girls like pink and dolls and boys like blue and trucks, then we are constructing the rules and the parameters for human life according to gender. And then the third is embodied subjectivity, which you see the blue tagline at the bottom, "Call me by my name." This is perhaps the view that we're wrestling with more than we have in any era before, but beginning to say, does gender get placed on us from the outside by society, or is there both that but also a firm subjectivity that persons get to look at their own understanding of who they are in their body and how they will act out life according to their own sense of who they are, and begin to choose their own sort of clothing rather than pink and blue. It's whatever you want to wear, rather than mothers looking a certain way. We all may have a stereotype of what a mother looks like. Perhaps you choose to wear your hair, your clothing, and take a job or do sort of have wear pigtails and work construction, which might be against some sort of social constructionist view or essentialist view of what female life may look like. Now, of course, you can flip that on male gender as well. But to begin to recognize what are the assumptions that you bring, and how do your congregation or the people that you are engaged in ministry with, how do they view gendered life? It's really important, because what comes out of your mouth and what you understand to be God's call on all of us, male and female together, will either match what many in your congregation understand to be true, or it will contradict it, and there will be tension. There are two key ways. There's probably more, but these titles are essentially, when we think of women and men together in the church, not just gender in the larger sense, which is the previous slide, but in the church, there are two camps, if you will, that most Christian churches fall into. Those of you that went to the preaching conference, we talked a bit about this. The church at North Coast fall into the Christian complementarianism role, which would say women and men serve together, but they have differing roles. For instance, women would not be a part of the preaching staff. They probably would be in the children's ministry. Women may sing or be a part of certain kinds of mission and outreach programs, but they probably wouldn't be treasurer or perhaps not even on an elder board. So there are some real gender distinctions, complementary roles that work together, but very distinct on the basis of kind of essentialist and social constructionist views of gender. On the other side, Christian egalitarianism doesn't focus so much on gender. It's who's gifted to preach, let them preach, male or female. Who's gifted to work with the books, let them be the treasurer. Who's gifted to work with children, male or female, let them be in ministry to children. It puts giftedness rather than gender at the forefront. I lean toward Christian egalitarianism. Those that are in the holiness and Pentecostal movements tend to lean that direction. I'm not saying that either one of these is not okay. It certainly is. There are biblical basis for both of these, but you need to know what kind of church you're working with. It has all sorts of implications for not only preaching, but how you support the gifts and the callings of those who are in your church, and how you help them find adequate places to be who they are. Because remember, the key role of any pastor is to equip others for ministry. Part of the preaching role is to equip others, to call forth gifts, to help people gain a theological vision and a spiritual understanding so they then can be in ministry to others.